on that camera and strap in. It's time for another episode of TOGCHAT Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news and tips, along with your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus Visionary Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, good Wednesday evening. Thanks for joining me for another live YouTube edition of TOGCHAT. As always, gang, before we get going, please take a moment, tell your photography friends that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Already, we've got a few more people than normal in here. I don't know, everybody's expecting something big to happen tonight. I have no clue what they're expecting, but nonetheless, let them know. Please do me a favor. You can click that share button down below, or you can go ahead and you can share that link, tog.chat/live. I just put it there in the chat window for you. Guys, we got photographers tuning in here from all over the world. I got Joe in Michigan. I got Rick from Connecticut, David in Central California, Carl in Illinois, Ken in the UK. Who else we got here? We got Lynn in New York, Pablo in Argentina, David in Spain. You guys are awesome. Charles in South Jersey. Sorry, Charles, but hey, anyway. Robert in Mexico. Thank you guys for hanging out for a Wednesday evening. Let's try and make this a productive one and see what we can learn tonight, right? So please, though, make sure you check in, leave a comment. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're watching from. It's always cool to see where people are at. And of course, start posting questions. I actually only have a few questions lined up for tonight. You know that my mission is to help you develop a solid understanding of the hows and whys behind great photography. So get those questions in there, and I will do my darndest to answer them all in the next 60 minutes, okay? So before we dig in, just a real quick update on online presentations because they're going really, really well. I've got a full calendar of them coming up. So I'm just going to switch my screen over here, go to the web browser, and remind you guys, I'll put the link in the window here, that there is a whole long list of them. I know a bunch of you were at my presentation on exposure last night, which kind of spun a lot of heads around because we did some really crazy stuff like telling people stop paying attention to the exposure triangle because it doesn't work. Things like that. So if you missed that one and you want to find out what that's all about, it's coming up again in August. So register before it fills up. This last one filled up. A bunch of people didn't get to attend, okay? So you've been warned, there's stuff there. There's a bunch of new ones that are getting added this weekend. I keep telling you that every week, and each week I'm adding like one or two more. This weekend, get ready. The announcement is going to hit here for the webinar that is all about prep. You all have so many questions for me all the time about how do I prep for shoots and how do I get my subjects prepped and make sure they don't flake and all that stuff. It's coming. Every little detail of it, every little piece. So make sure you check out that page. It's a good idea to actually go ahead and sign up for my email newsletter, which you can register for on pretty much any page on the website. And that way you'll also get notified as soon as that comes up. And one more little piece of business. I want to let you guys know that I have a new video that just launched a couple days ago. It is on my channel. It's right here. It's called Why You Need to Join Professional Photographers of America. So if you're already a member, well, duh, you know, right? Okay, but if you're not a member, you should check out this video. Seriously, understand that just because the name of the organization is Professional Photographers of America, it's not just for professional photographers. And that's really the point of the video, to make sure that you understand what the benefits are, okay? Full disclosure, I was paid to make the video. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I am an ambassador for PPA. Full disclosure, I'm also a dues paying member. I pay to be a member every year. Have been since like the early 2000s. It's an organization that I strongly and firmly believe in. Guys got to make a buck along the way. So they asked me if I would partner with them to make a video to educate people. And I was like, that's what I do. I'm in. So the good part is, for those of you that may be interested in joining up, I do want to share, and I'm going to share the link for the video, but I'm also going to share a discount link for you. So if you do sign up, use the link that's here. You'll save 25 bucks off of your PPA membership when you do sign up. So let me just make sure I get that spaced out there so you can actually use these links, okay? There we go. Cool. All right, so there's 2 sets of links there. One is the video, and then the second one is the $25 off the membership. That's all our business stuff, right? So let's get into our questions. And I see Tina just snuck in here a few minutes ago. Tina left a question for me in my Facebook group. So let me go ahead and read this one really, really quick. Tina wrote in the Understanding Exposure presentation, which was last night. David, thanks you so much, man. I appreciate the super chat. She said, or asked, I said, as a rule, it's a good idea, a rule of thumb, sorry, no rules, a rule of thumb. It's a good idea to avoid shutter speeds that are lower than the focal length of your lens. So if you guys have never heard that suggestion before, it's a great way, honestly, to try and ensure that you are not getting camera motion in your shots. So now keep in mind, right? Cameras today have incredible image stabilization technology, which, by the way, you know, Olympus brought most of that to the market, just saying, but they have great image stabilization technology. So on one hand, you know, we could argue, well, the camera's so good, it's going to take care of it. I don't care what brand camera you're using. It's a camera, meaning it's a machine, right? So this rule of thumb carries over from back in the film days, from back in the early digital days when there was no image stabilization, but it's a good rule of thumb. And that is that for hand-holding purposes, you generally don't want to use a focal length that is, or excuse me, let me try that one more time. For hand-holding purposes, you generally don't want to use a shutter speed that is a number that would be slower than the focal length of the lens that you're using, okay? It's a good rule of thumb that's going to help you prevent camera motion, shake, right? So Tina's question basically was, why is that? Does it have to do with noise, whatever? No, Tina, it's strictly to do with camera motion, okay? Now, there are exceptions to that rule too, from a practical sense. I had somebody ask me during the presentation last night, well, what about if I'm using maybe like a 35 millimeter lens? Does that mean that I shouldn't go slower than a 30th of a second? Well, yes and no, right? It's also a good rule of thumb. In other words, a suggestion, a good practice. Try and avoid hand-holding anything less than a 50th of a second or a 60th of a second for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you're not photographing something that is inanimate, meaning not moving, then a 50th or a 60th of a second, even if somebody goes and waves, there's camera motion, or excuse me, there's subject motion that's going to happen there, right? If you're jostled, if you're just the slightest bit bouncy, it's possible to get camera shake even at a 50th or a 60th, but a 30th, it's a lot easier to get. So certainly the wide angle lens will mask that a little bit. So the reason why I'm sounding so wishy-washy about it is because it's not like a hard, fast rule. It's just a good practice. It's a practice that will help you in that 1 in a million situation where maybe you're in a hurry, maybe you're not paying attention quite as much as you should, and you're jostled, you're not as steady, and then you don't get the shot because also the image stabilization doesn't catch up with whatever you're doing, right? But definitely not a noise issue, Tina. It's not that it's going to improve your image quality beyond the idea of you don't want any camera motion in your shot. I know, like with my Olympus gear, my EM1 Mark II, the EM1 Mark III, my EM1X, all those, the image stabilization is amazing. And if anything, I actually find myself getting a little sloppy in the sense that I don't pay attention as much as I should because I know that it's going to do the heavy lifting. But still, I like to, I really like to kind of focus on using habits and having a system that is consistent and is basically going to use these special camera features like the amazing image stabilization of any camera brand, use that to kind of cover my butt, okay? So, all right. So there it is, the elephant in the room. So Robert, since you asked politely, and I'm not kidding, like, since you asked politely, now I will warn the rest of you, Michael, all the rest, if you're smart, you'll just be quiet and listen, and I will go ahead and I will address the elephant in the room. But if anybody wants to push my buttons tonight, you're not going to get me to rant. I'm just going to bounce you out of here. So you've been forewarned. It's real simple, right? So obviously, unless you've been, underneath a rock, okay, there was a big announcement today. So here is my opinions, all right? It's real simple. The fact is that today's announcement from Olympus, it doesn't change a thing about how this camera works. It doesn't change the quality of the camera. In fact, it doesn't change the quality of the entire system at all. You know what else it doesn't change? It doesn't change my ability as a photographer. It doesn't change my passion for photography. It doesn't change my desire to help photographers to improve their skills as photographers. That's been my mission for the last 5 years. As kind of a way to pay back an industry that honestly has given me my whole life. And it will continue to be my mission. So my point about this whole thing is, today's announcement, it doesn't change a damn thing. It simply doesn't. All of this waste of time and energy and, oh my God, the sky is falling, the world is ending, a camera company is being sold, and what's going to happen? The worst part of it, for the overwhelming majority of the people that are, oh my God, and the overwhelming people, or the overwhelming majority of those of you that are here, it means absolutely freaking nothing. So why do you care? Now, for Olympus owners, let me talk directly to you. My advice is, because I don't know any more than you do, I absolutely do not. Olympus has released several statements today after the initial statement, Olympus USA, and basically said, look, we know as much as you do, things are ongoing. There are negotiations happening, things are being, worked out, etc. Nobody knows, and that's the point, right? So for Olympus owners, my advice, stop assuming the worst. Just stop. You have great gear. Use it. Go take pictures. Enjoy photography like you did yesterday before this announcement. And we're all going to find out together what the future holds. But that future's not coming tomorrow or the day after or the day after. This is going to take a while. I mean, folks, look, for all the hype, and again, I want to thank you, my audience, for respecting me enough to not be going over the top with this tonight because I was worried about that. The fact is, on a personal level, this announcement impacts the livelihood of people that I consider to be very dear friends. The announcement impacts me and it impacts my livelihood in ways that a lot of people on the internet don't care to imagine because it's more fun to spread drama and be jerks. You guys have no idea how many messages and tweets and emails calling me every piece of trash imaginable that I received today. Regardless, I'm still here to help people learn photography for free because I'm passionate about photography and I'm passionate about seeing other people succeed. So sincerely, and this is not meant to be an insult, this is being practical, folks. So please, I'm a straight shooter, take it as such. The simple reality of it is there's not a one of us, myself included, but all of you sitting there on the other end of YouTube, there's not a one of us that doesn't need to improve our photography. Not one. So let's focus on what's important. Understand that all this drama, when it happens and you buy into it and you talk about it and you post about it, I get it. For some people, it's fun. But the problem of it is, it all has a negative impact on your photography and your wallet, regardless of what camera brand you use. It doesn't matter what brand you use. In fact, all you Sony users, let's just imagine if Olympus were to stop making cameras, guess what? That's lost revenue for Sony. So it impacts all of us. It is not good. It is not fun. Nobody wins. So the fact of the matter is, Olympus is great gear. You don't have to love it. You don't have to agree with that. But it's great gear. I believe, this is just me, no inside information, gang. I believe it will survive. I do. And I'm not going to lie, I hope it will survive. Certainly, only time will tell. We'll have to see. But I will tell you, I've seen several videos and statements by other YouTubers and some of these blog articles out today. And the sad part of it is, there is a lot of stupid and false information. I saw one YouTuber make a claim today that all of the US sales staff was dismissed 2 weeks ago, that all of the US staff is gone 2 weeks ago. Well, you know what? If that happened, maybe somebody ought to tell them that, because I was communicating with them today and yesterday and the day before. They're still working. In fact, they're still working as if nothing happened, because that's all they can do, right? They support the brand. Those people, the thing that's great about those people, they live and they die this brand. They're fighting to make it work. So sure, it's out of their hands ultimately. Those decisions are going to be made in Japan, and they're going to be made at a corporate level that's beyond their pay grade. But we'll see. Time will tell, right? But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't change anything about, the gear that we have now and that we have to use. But please, look, I'm just as guilty. I mean, I want to be really clear. I love to kind of poke fun and jab people and make a joke about Sony or make a joke about Canon being heavy or whatever, right? And maybe I should even stop doing that. Maybe that stuff's inappropriate. Because honestly, maybe it is. But when we get caught up in all of this just crazy drama about, Nikon, they're going to have to be next. Like the minute this announcement came out from Olympus, I start seeing all this, the whole Nikon's going to have to be next. Like, come on. Like, it's like wishing it to happen, because that is the net result. The harder you make it for these companies to sell product, the more likelihood there is of these companies failing. And no matter what, the less product they sell, they still have a set amount of overhead. And the irony of it is, what so many of you don't realize, if you go to an event like Photo Plus, if you go to an event like WPPI, if you go to an event like Shutterfest, if you go to an event like ClickCon, if you go to Pixel Photo Fest, if you go to any of these events, all of these speakers that are there, they're there because the camera companies paid for it. That's how they got there. So these camera companies that you're making it harder to do business and to earn money and to make a profit, it's not just about the cameras, gang. Every one of these companies puts a tremendous amount of money and energy and effort into paying back to the community and supporting this community. This community that is getting smaller and smaller and smaller because of iPhones. So please, this has got nothing to do with Olympus. This is my passionate plea as a photographer. Please wake up and realize that I get it. It's a human thing. It's easy to get caught up in that drama. I've been guilty of it in my life too. But I guess being on the other side of it now and being able to see both sides, it's been a real wake-up call for me. It really has. And that's why I'm just trying to make you all understand. There's so much that we do get to take advantage of as photographers at these trade shows and these events that we take for granted. If it wasn't for these manufacturers, we wouldn't have it. So the harder we make it for them to do business, the harder we make it for them to succeed, the more the gear costs, the less research and development and the less innovation that comes into play, and the less they are able to give back. Just saying, right? So again, I want to be really clear. I think I had the most amazing audience in the world and I owe you all an apology. I was expecting a lot more grief tonight. I was. Thank you so much for proving that thought wrong. And I appreciate your support and understand that, look, no matter what happens to Olympus, I'm doing what I'm doing, right? Sure, I'm worried, of course. But I believe in the brand. I believe in the gear. I believe in all of it, right? And time will tell. So, trust me, first thing I did this morning, I went out and I started doing my research on this company in Japan that they're talking about. There's nothing bad about them. So, got a good camera brand with really good gear. There's a lot of great people working for that company that, believe me, they bleed Olympus blue. So we just have to wait and see because nobody knows. And by the way, I did have a couple people that pointed out today, well, 8 months ago, they asked the CEO outright, like, is the camera division up for sale and this and that? And they accused him of lying and said, no, folks, listen, let's be clear. And I'm not defending them. I just want to point something out. He wasn't lying. When you're a publicly traded company, there is a very limited amount of information that you are allowed to publicly disclose because it can lead to insider trading and all kinds of other things. And look, it's no secret. Back in 2010 or 2011, I don't remember the exact date, but back then, Olympus in Japan got in trouble with, I guess the SEC or their equivalent of that, whatever. Okay. And so they've spent a lot of years since rectifying that situation. And part of that is they've had to work with extreme transparency compared to many other companies. So the fact that those statements were made 8 months ago, it wasn't a lie. It was the CEO doing his job. And the fact of the matter is, me nor anyone else, and again, folks, this is just, understanding how the world works, okay? Right? None of us knows. We don't know inside firsthand what was happening. We just don't. Eventually, we'll find out. Eventually, it will become public. And eventually, they'll tell us. Not Olympus even. It'll be public knowledge because it's a publicly traded company. Okay? So we just have to wait and see. Right? That's it. We just wait and see. But in the meantime, we focus on photography. So anyway, that's my statement. Robert, thank you for asking in a very polite and considerate way. I sincerely appreciate that approach. As I said, I was expecting things to be a little different on that topic. Okay. All right. I want to go back here and I want to, because I saw some questions come through. I know I've got a super chat early on that I definitely want to answer from David. So, and by the way, I saw a couple other super chats come through, guys. You're all like amazing. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Another David, thank you. Tools change, skills remain the same. They do indeed. And then Michael just bought an EM1 Mark III, and man, it's an amazing camera. And I have no way to tell you what's going to happen in a year from now, so I'm not even going to try. But I will tell you this: I believe in the company. I believe in the brand. So for now, we just have to wait and see, and we've got to enjoy our gear and enjoy photography. So, I don't think Kevin, David, also thank you so much for the super chats. I really sincerely appreciate it. Okay. All right. So, David, back in the beginning here, let me get this first one. His question was, I've got a business question tonight, and I love business questions because I don't get enough of these. I love it when I see people like making that transition and making money with their camera. Okay. What would be the best strategy for showing a client their photos? I come across issues where the client may be viewing the photos on a medium that possibly has bad coloring. In other words, could be a phone, could be a tablet, could be a really crappy, cheap monitor or a laptop with a bad screen. So it totally makes sense. He went on to add, it kind of looks good on their screen, or on his screen, but not on theirs. And then I asked him how he's currently showing proofs, so I want to get an understanding of exactly kind of what the workflow was that he's doing. And then his response was, oops, let me get that up there on screen. I've been showing him through my website. He uses Squarespace. That's fine. Or Dropbox. I'm stopping this, he says. That's good. That's a perfect answer, David. And then he goes on to say, I'm thinking about just doing everything in person. So the cool part of it is, folks, this is why I love it when people think out loud. This is why I always ask you for as much information as possible. Because honestly, you're all freaking smart enough to solve your own problems. Sometimes you just need a little push in the right direction. David, you completely got the right idea. If you ultimately want to make money doing what you're doing, the in-person sales, because it is sales, no matter how we spin it, folks, it's sales. The in-person sales is, Guy, thank you so much for the super chat. In-person sales is where the money is going to be for a couple of reasons, though, David. That's the short answer. Let me give you a little bit more background so that you can really get your head wrapped around it. Okay. Certainly from our side of the fence, photographers, it's a whole lot easier. Go do the shoot. We come back, we do our edits, maybe do a little prep, and we run them through a proofing program, put them up online. Poof. Like, how easy is that? And then if you're using maybe like SmugMug or Pixieset or Zenfolio, you've got your account set up and attached to a lab. Like SmugMug uses Bay Photo, but then you got a situation where, okay, the people go through, they check off which ones they want, they pay their money. Bay Photo does the printing and the fulfillment. They send it like, wow, isn't that cool? And yeah, that's like super easy, but it's not going to make you big bucks. Because what happens when you do that is you're leaving out, honestly, the most important element of the sales process, right? Now, there's that word again, sales. And that's the thing that you have to understand. So David, and plus the rest of you, if you're thinking about, especially portrait and wedding photographers, these two categories in particular, if you're thinking about building a business, do not overlook the importance of the concept of selling. It's a necessary evil if you want to make money. So the benefit to doing it in person, David, is real simple. In person, you're going to go back and hopefully you're charging the right amount of money, meaning you're not doing this stuff too cheap. You're going to go back and let's just say you did an engagement session, right? So maybe it's a portrait session for a couple, it's an engagement session. You should go back with a little kind of gift basket, maybe with some chocolates in it. A bottle of champagne. It doesn't have to be the most expensive stuff in the world. It can be cheap champagne. 2 glasses. Maybe even you get like a Mr. and Mrs. set of glasses as an early wedding gift for them. Cheap, right? Now, if you figure out the cost of this stuff, gang, this is a really, really small piece of money to spend to make bigger money. So you're going to go back and you're going to sit down with them. So maybe you take a laptop and you show them the pictures on the laptop. Better yet, if you're smart, you go to a place like Walmart or you go into Amazon and you purchase yourself like a 37-inch or a 42-inch TV, which you can do for like under $200 now, okay? So think about that, right? Less than $200, you can have a decent-sized TV. When I go out to do presentations at camera clubs, I frequently take a 42-inch TV to use as a teleprompter. And it's easy. I have it in a bag. I went to an art supply store, like well, around here there's a chain called Dick Blick, but it's an art supply store, and got a big portfolio case, like a duffel case. I put the TV in it in the box. So you go, and you literally, when you go, you take a few minutes. When you get there, you tell them in advance, like, hey, I want to set some stuff up for you. I want to show you. So you take a couple minutes, you set up this TV, you plug your laptop into it, boom. Now they're looking at like 30-inch images on a high-definition television, right? And so now you have the ability to let them experience the images. But there's more. Part of this process is also making emotional connections. So you're sitting in their home. Now that you're in their home, you have the ability to essentially take stock of where might they be able to hang big pictures. So you're able to talk about the idea, oh, this shot, guys, this shot would look so amazing above that fireplace. Get a nice wooden frame for it, do it like 24 or 36 inches wide. It would look incredible. And this shot that we did at the end where you guys are goofing and laughing at each other, you know where you need that. You need to hang that picture in the hallway right outside your bedroom. Big, like easily 20, 24 inches tall. You got to do it, guys. That way, for the rest of your lives, every morning, you're going to get up, you're going to walk out of your bedroom to go downstairs for breakfast, and that picture and that fun moment of the two of you is going to greet you. You build a story around the pictures. You're connecting emotionally. When you show the pictures online, you've already figured out part of the problem, David, is that you can't control the color on the other person's, screens, etc. When you are there and you can talk to them, you're able to build a story around it and make that emotional connection. That's what people will spend the money for. For those of you that have attended any of my marketing presentations that I've been doing online, it doesn't matter whether it's social media, whether it's websites, regardless, or personal branding. Every one of those talks, I talk about the idea of building relationships and making emotional connections. That's actually what people are spending the money for. Yeah, there's a given, folks. And David, this applies to you too. Pictures better be amazing, right? But the point is, I don't care how amazing they are, if you don't have the connection, they're not going to spend the money. Many of you, his name comes up here every now and then because I bring him up, and this is completely changing categories. We'll talk about landscape photographers. Many of you have heard me talk about a photographer named Peter Lick, and he's the guy that made a big brouhaha in the photography news a year or 2 years ago now, because he sold a print for like $2 million. Think about that, $2 million for a print, okay? So it just so happened that whole story blew up. And the reason it blew up was because it was a composite. He had taken a full moon shot and added it to another scene. And it's a brilliant, brilliant image, truly a brilliant image, but it's composite. And the photography world was all freaked out because people spent $2 million for a composite. Oh my God. But this isn't the point. That news broke right before WPPI. So this would have been it would have been 2 years ago. The news broke right before WPPI in Las Vegas. And it just so happens that Peter Lick has 2 galleries in Las Vegas. So admittedly, I was kind of nosy to see if I could actually see a print of it like in person. I'd seen it, all over the internet, but I thought, oh, it'd be cool to see it in person. And I had been into his galleries before, but I hadn't really paid attention to it. So I walked into the gallery that's in Mandalay Bay, hoping to see it. And these are expensive images that are printed, and they're big. I mean, some of the prints in there are like 8 feet wide. Not exaggerating. They're like 8 feet wide. So you walk in the door, a salesperson comes up to you pretty quickly, right? And they don't try to hard sell you anything at all. And I'm one of those people, I'll usually just tell them right out of the box, like, oh, I'm just a photographer that's interested in looking at the work. And that way they will take it and they will leave me alone. But on this, yes, D-Cycle, I'm talking about the moon picture. Yes, and that's not really the name for it, but you're right. It's a picture with the moon. So this particular time I walked in, and I didn't say anything right away about being a photographer because honestly, I thought they might be a bit sensitive to that because they were getting lots of negative press in the photography world. Mind you, he's sitting with a $2 million paycheck, right? But, so I was a little worried about that. So I just started up a conversation with a salesperson. And from minute one, all this salesperson did was tell me stories. They told me stories about what Peter went through to make the photo and why the photo was important to him and why it meant something to him. And then when I finally did ask about that picture, not only did they show me the photo, they took me into a room, a side room where they had it sitting on the wall to show me, and I cannot remember the name of the printing technique, but his images are printed in a way that if you walk around the room looking at the picture, as light changes, the image changes. And I don't mean like a hologram. I go with a different picture. I just mean the tonal ranges change. It's amazing. If you ever get a chance to see one in person, it's amazing. But even when we went into the room, they started talking about, different ways that you could display this photo. All the while, never attempting to sell me. Everything was about getting me to make an emotional, connection, okay? Mark Faust, Peter Lick is a fellow Aussie, he has great management and connections. Absolutely, man. And he's earned everything. He's earned everything he's got. I mean, his work is incredible. And he's every bit as brilliant, a businessman. And understand that being a brilliant businessman doesn't even necessarily mean that you know all the business things. But if you got the right management working for you and you've got the right people guiding you, that still makes you a brilliant businessman. That's the key. So David, that was a long answer, but I hope that helps. I hope that makes some sense. In person is the way to go. Yes, it's a little more work. So obviously, remember, David, since it's more work, since it takes more time, you need to be factoring that in. You need to build that in to your pricing, right? Which means you're going to probably have to bump your prices up a little bit. But trust me, when you're making that emotional connection, that works. And then, believe it or not, David, there's a set of books. You don't need to read a set of them. Read the very first one. So this is a book from the late 1970s. It's called See You at the Top. It's written by a man. He's no longer with us. His name is Zig Ziglar. Yeah, weird name. Zigziglar. Zig Ziglar, See You at the Top. Read that book if you've never done sales before. It's not going to teach you how to be a salesman. Well, I shouldn't say that. It will teach you how to be a great salesman if you are capable of processing and thinking outside the box a little bit. It's not okay, if you want to make a sale, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, here's step 4. No. The only steps that Zig Ziglar ever talks about are what are universally known. You can even Google the 5 steps to making a sale. He does talk about that. But what Zig Ziglar does in the book, basically the whole book is stories about cars that he has sold because he's a car salesman, was a car salesman. And he talks about how he makes these connections and build these relationships. So he's giving you little snippets from his career. And it's brilliant. It literally changed the world for me as a business person in understanding, what was required to get it done. So, David, I hope that helps. Thank you again for the super chat. Really, really appreciate it. Okay. All right. Scrolling on down here. I know we got some good stuff in here. Let's see. Anthony Thomas. I am a Capture One user. Just wondering if you use Portrait Pro, or Luminar, or any other add-on software for your glamour or beauty genre projects. I am primarily Photoshop. I actually do have Portrait Pro, and I have used it a few times. And I'm not going to lie, it's kind of cool. So I'll come back to Portrait Pro in a second. I do also have Luminar, mainly just to kind of keep track of it. In that sense, I sincerely think that Luminar has tremendous potential for the average kind of amateur, passionate photographer. Luminar is amazing, much better than Lightroom. For photographers that maybe specialize in, shall we say, like landscapes, nature, wildlife things, Luminar, outstanding, even potentially better than Adobe products, okay? It's just not quite where I would need it to be yet for the kind of work I do. Remember, I do a lot of compositing and things like that. And while the new AI that they have is pretty doggone amazing, it's just not what I need it to be yet for my people shots. That being said, Portrait Pro. If we were to go back to some of my very, very first talk chats, which, by the way, were 205 episodes ago. Can you believe this is the 205th talk chat that I've done tonight? That's insane. But if we were to go back to the very beginning of those, you would be able to find me saying Portrait Pro is a complete joke. And I used to complain about their advertising because if you've been around long enough, the old ads for Portrait Pro, and when I say old, we're talking 4 years ago, right? 4 or 5 years ago. The old ads, the pictures in those ads were so horrible. It's like, who would buy that software looking at that picture? Like, oh my God. So they got past that. They grew up, they got a new marketing firm, they got smarter, right? It's actually kind of cool, but here's the thing, right? Before any of you run out and buy it, it's like any other piece of software. It's got a learning curve to use it right. So on one hand, the problem with Portrait Pro is people that don't know what they're doing buy it and they realize I can go click, click, and I have an uber retouched portrait. And that's the problem. It really is uber retouched, and it looks like it's been retouched by a piece of software. And it's like, oh my God, what the heck happened to that person? Okay. And so you see a lot of really bad pictures from it. I, on the other hand, know photographers, and myself, I've done some of the learning. I've gotten to the point that for some things, I can do some really interesting stuff with it. And I find it honestly truly fascinating because the AI behind it and its ability to do makeup changes and hair color changes and things like that, it's pretty freaking amazing. But again, if you're going to just kind of let the software do all of it, no. If you're going to use the software and its capabilities and manage it and manipulate it yourself, then yeah, it's interesting. However, when we're talking about the purpose that Capture One is designed for. So remember, gang, Capture One is a raw generator. Capture One isn't a retouching tool, none of that kind of stuff. Yet, maybe down the road, but not yet, okay? So Portrait Pro, definitely not a raw processor at all, not at all. So anything you're gonna do with Portrait Pro, if you're gonna do it well, you're also gonna be using another piece of software like Capture One or like Lightroom or Photoshop, etc. So definitely, even though I have it and play with it, it's not something I'm going to be switching from Adobe anytime soon. Okay. All right. So let's scroll on down here. Theo, you got to do your first Photoshop in months. Good for you, man. Unfortunately, I'm still not able to do that where I live, but hopefully soon. We'll see. Okay. And plus, the way we're going here in the U.S., we're likely to be shut down again really soon, so it's really hard to tell. All right, scrolling on down, and let's see here. Alvin, great webinar on exposure. Thank you, Alvin. Alvin, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Okay. Your problem is getting correct exposure when using off-camera flash with ambient light. Still using a DSLR, TTL seems to be too hot. Any tips? Yeah. So honestly, I wouldn't use TTL. The thing with TTL is it's kind of like the auto of auto, right? TTL is like almost like using program on your camera. In the right situation, cameras will do an amazing job with TTL. But the catch was in the right situation, right? That's just how it is. So the problem that you run in with TTL is it's not super consistent depending on what you're photographing. So basically when you're doing off-camera flash with ambient light, if your goal is to include both the ambient and the off-camera flash, right? I'm assuming that's why you're asking the question, Alvin. Basically what you want to do, the process is this. Meter your ambient light first. Now remember, your plan is to use a flash, so don't use a shutter speed that's faster than what your flash works at. But meter your ambient light first and get the exposure, do a test shot so that you have your ambient light recorded the way that you want it to look. Maybe you want the same brightness as your subject. Maybe you want it slightly underexposed, whatever. Figure that out first. Boom. Now that tells you what aperture you're shooting at. So let's say with that ambient light setting, you wind up at f8, okay? Now you're gonna turn your off-camera flash on, and all you have to do at that point is basically work the power up and down on that flash until you're at f8. And you have the exposure that you wanted. Okay. The problem with photographers run into with the off-camera flash and the ambient light thing is they start with the flash first and then they can't get the ambient light where they want it. And they're playing around trying to get the ambient light there. You meter the ambient first, you set your exposure for the ambient. And when I say set it for the ambient, the idea of correct exposure, it means what do you want the ambient to look like, right? You were in my webinar last night, Alvin, so you know what I'm talking about with correct exposure, right? So basically you're determining how do I want the ambient to look, and then you are going to go ahead and bring the flash in. Robert, and this is a great comment. I mean, this is part of what I think a lot of people miss about Joe McNally. TTL has seldom been kind to me. I am not Joe McNally. Let's face it, Robert, there's only one Joe McNally, right? But I will point this out to all of you, okay? Obviously, Joe McNally being a Nikon ambassador, they use him a lot to show off their flashes. Very smart move on their part. Can't blame them, right? But if you ever listen to Joe McNally when he breaks down a shot, or if you go and you read one of his books, like Hot Shoe Diaries, okay? This man understands how those flashes work better than the flashes understand how they work. And what I mean by that is real simple. Just listen to the way he breaks his shots down. He breaks his shots down. Every thought process he has, he's thinking manually. And then he's using the flashes either on auto or on TTL to solve the problem of the situation. The problem being he's in one helicopter photographing somebody in the next helicopter and there's a flash there. Well, that's a problem. So whatever he does with the flash, he's got to understand how's that flash going to react? And what does he want the scene to look like? And understanding all that information, Eric, thank you so much, man. I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So that's really kind of the brilliance of what is Joe McNally. And he makes no secret of it. If you read anything that he writes, or if you listen and watch him and then listen to the way he breaks it down, everything he's doing with these flashes in automatic or in TTL, he's doing it manually. And he's breaking it down manually. And then he's using, and this is actually a great point, folks. If you want really great, consistent results as a photographer, things like auto, things like TTL, all that kind of stuff, understand that they are tools. They are not a way of life. They are not the way to do things. They are tools that you use to solve a problem. Anytime you take a feature that is auto and you use that as a rule, you're basically just turning auto into the 4-letter word for forget about it. And then, just like Robin said, it's not going to be kind to you. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't work. That's the challenge with it, right? Okay, let's see. Going back up here to where I left off. Where was I? I lost my spot. Let's see here. Let's get this one from Ajax. Sorry. Have I tried replacing modeling lights and strobes with LED lights? I'm using the Godox M300 and 8600 strobes. I'd like to cut the heat down to use slow shutter speeds with gels without them melting. Ooh. I have not, Ajax. If you're really into tinkering, you could certainly do that. Why not just, I guess, Ajax, where I'm kind of stuck on this, why not turn the modeling light off? Like once you've used the modeling light to see how your light works, because I see myself, I don't really use modeling lights. So you shoot long enough, you get to the point you don't need the modeling light. But there's nothing wrong with using a modeling light. So I'm not saying that to push anybody. But once you've basically used the modeling light to get your light looking the way you want it, why not just turn it off? Give me a little bit more feedback there, because I feel like I may be missing a little bit of what it is that you want to do. Okay. Let's see here. D-Psycho, my daughter had a headshot gig yesterday and the client wanted outdoor pics. Although you would expect a simple background, he wanted a tree and a park background. I asked about the usage from your tips, and he mentioned that if they didn't work, he would redo the session. I guess 2 days of work for my daughter. Well, I mean, that's kind of weird in my opinion, but as long as the client's willing to pay for that 2 days of work, then hey, yeah, I mean, good for your daughter as far as that goes. But unfortunately, it's one of those things. D-Cycler, sometimes no matter how hard you try, clients just get something in their head, they get an idea in their head, and you're not going to convince them otherwise. So your challenge when you're making money and you're putting pricing together and negotiating contracts, your challenge is if you're aware of that potential and if you think that that's coming, then you need to kind of build that potential into your price, especially if you think the client is not going to be willing to, pay for additional, time. So Ajax, you're telling me you're capturing motion, and that's why you're asking about changing out the LEDs. So I don't understand what the LED is doing for you then. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I'm kind of missing the piece. So tell me why you need the LED on while you're shooting. That's the part that I don't get, okay? All right, scrolling back up here. Let's see. Richard, I have the Ollie 60mm f2.8 macro. Which would be more beneficial for getting larger magnification, an extension tube or a Raynox? Richard, I'm not a macro guy, so I would love to be able to tell you something, but I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know what a Raynox is, and I've used extension tubes and hate them. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of advice I can give you that one. Sorry. Okay. All right, scrolling on down here. So Ajax, I guess what I'm missing here is, all right, so Ajax said, so the color gel stay lit, but you're shooting with strobes, right? The Godox 8600 and the 300, they're strobes. So why do you need the LED lit. The strobe is going to light the gel. Like, I don't understand why the LED is a big deal. That's what I'm not getting. We're passing each other here. Okay. All right. Scrolling on down here. From Kevin. In the exposure talk yesterday, you briefly touched on exposure compensation feature as a last step adjustment, perhaps like outside shooting and compensation for sun changes, etc. Is this compensation a type? Is it an ISO type of change? Depends, Kevin. I hate to give you an answer like that, but it depends on what my priorities are. So in the webinar, I talked about the idea that I introduced the concept, which I've not talked a lot before. This was a recent thought that I had. And I thought, okay, I think people will connect with that. And the good news is I think a lot of people did. But I talked about working out your exposure as kind of putting a puzzle together, because I really do. Like, my mission, it's to make people stop thinking about the damn exposure triangle. The exposure triangle is worthless. It's useless. It's pointless. So that being said, each shot, it's a puzzle. And folks, just in case you're wondering about the exposure triangle, the puzzle is not, shutter speed, aperture, ISO. No. The puzzle is so much more. The puzzle is shutter speed, aperture, ISO. It is also how much depth of field do you want? How shallow or how deep do you want your focus to be? It is, do you need to stop motion? Do you want motion blur? It is so many things, okay? So as you're doing the puzzle, Kevin, the decision of, is it going to be exposure compensation in terms of adjusting your aperture or adjusting your ISO? It's really going to be dependent upon the puzzle that you're putting together. So I mentioned, and I showed in the webinar, a couple pictures of my grandson. When I'm chasing him around the yard or chasing him around the house and doing stuff like that, I will usually make it an ISO compensation. I don't use auto ISO that often, or if I'm going to use auto ISO, I will use auto ISO and then I will just dial in the pluses or the minuses from there. But it's really going to depend kind of on the puzzle and what settings are really important to you, going into that shot. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Scrolling on down and scrolling on down still. I know there's a bunch of German, is there any chance to buy one of your cool shirts or other TOGCHAT merchandise? So there are some t-shirts in that you can buy, which you should find them actually underneath all the videos if you click on a video. I'm working on seeing if I can make these available because I actually had these done locally. The shirts themselves, guys, they're actually really cheap shirts. So the company with all the cool shirts that I used to wear, they went out of business. They don't make them anymore. And I bought up every one I could find, but that was years ago. They're gone. So these shirts are actually just Dickies shirts. They're cheap. They cost me like 20 bucks a piece. That's it. And they're actually super comfortable. That's the best part. But I went to a local embroiderer and I had, my Target and the name put on. So I've been having conversations with them while this whole lockdown has been going on about how we might be able to work out some kind of an arrangement that I could do this. So maybe we'll see. I promise I will let you guys know for sure if it happens. Okay. Let's see here. And scrolling on down. Let's see here. Anthony, what are your thoughts on using Zoom or other video platforms for in-person sales? Obviously, given the crazy times we're in, Anthony, I mean, it's better than nothing, right? Ultimately, though, no. Nothing beats in-person sales. I mean, even if you look at what I've done to try and generate some income, right? When, the lockdown happened for me in March, literally all of my bookings, guys, I was set up with my busiest year ever this year. My calendar was packed all the way out through November. It's awesome. Every single booking, gone. Not a one of them, gone. Okay. Photo Plus is still technically on the calendar, but I'm not so sure about that, right? So they're gone. So my pivot, and as a business person, that's what you do, guys. You pivot. That's business, right? So I decided to start doing, online teaching. I looked into the webinar platforms. I kind of liked that idea, but my challenge was I have attended a lot of webinars, especially marketing webinars, and they're painful. They're so painful because the person's like sitting there staring down at their laptop. Worst thing ever. They're staring down at their laptop, and it's like, yeah. And so like I've got this this slide deck that I want to show you. Let me change my screen over to the slide deck. And it's just like, oh my God. So just like when I started my YouTube channel, which I've talked to you guys about, like I went and looked at things and thought, okay, if I'm going to do YouTube videos, what can I do that nobody else is doing? So with these online classes, my challenge was, how can I not make it feel like, how can I not make it feel like it's, one of these clunky webinars? How can I make it feel as much as possible like seeing me present in person? Okay. So, that really was the challenge. I think if you're in a situation where your back is against the wall, Anthony, and you've got to use Zoom or something like that to do the in-person sales, you've got to work really, really hard to make the connection, because it's harder. It just is, right? It's better than when we can't see somebody, but it's still not the same. So I know that was kind of a roundabout, but I hope you kind of get the point. It's not just, okay, use it. It's a matter of you've got to try and close that gap. Okay. So this ought to be an interesting one. Here, let me jump down. I'm gonna cherry pick answers here, guys. Ready? Sorry, wrong mouse. Let's go down here. I'm gonna cherry pick this answer. John Guest. I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. So you want to fill me in? Go ahead. You've got the floor, man. It says here, it's unfair for you to dismiss something that you teach. I get you're an academic, but it's no reason for you to cherry pick your responses. I subscribe. I just want to hold you responsible. So, John, you're leveling some big ass accusations there. What am I cherry picking, man? I'm sorry, but I have no idea what the heck you're talking about. So the floor is yours. If you don't mind, I'm going to go answer another question. Type away. Give me as much detail as you need to, and I'm all yours. Okay? So, all right, we'll come back to that one. And scrolling on up. Okay. I got that one. I got that one. Scrolling back up here. Kostov. I want to learn Flash as a beginner. Is the Godox 3500 a good option for my EM1 Mark III? I'm blown away by the 12-100 f4. The Godox 3500 is a nice flash. Here's what I would actually encourage you to do, okay? I'm not a big fan, and I hope I'm saying your name right, Kostov, okay? I apologize if I got it wrong. I'm not a big fan of the idea of saying, well, this flash is good for this camera, because I look at them as two completely different sets of tools, and they're not really tied together. Unless, now that I explained that, or said that, let me explain. If where you are today with your photography, you only ever imagine using an on-camera speed light, if you are convinced that you are never going to need light beyond that, then sure, it's one thing to say, okay, does this flash play nice with this camera, etc. Okay? But in all reality, I think that what you should be looking at is, what do you want to do in a year, 2 years, or 3 years? Are you going to want more than just an on-camera flash? Or are you going to want an off-camera flash? Are you going to maybe want a studio flash? The reason I suggest that you do that is because then the decision to buy that speed light or that small flash is impacted by, down the road, can I use it with bigger flashes? Is it compatible? Does it, interact? So the nice part about all the Godox strobes, they all work off of the Godox transmitters, regardless of what brand camera you're using, right? So indeed, that is definitely a pro in terms of, pros and cons. That's a pro for Godox. So that's the only reason I just wanted to explain it. Don't worry about the flash for your camera. The only thing you have to worry about it for your camera is, does it fire with Olympus? That's the only thing you have to worry about. But in terms of is it the best flash for your camera? it really depends on what you want to photograph and what you're trying to do. Okay? So, all right. John, I'm not your enemy. I love what you're doing. John, look, I'm not trying to make you my enemy, but I'm really serious. I absolutely do not understand your first comment. And again, I'm not trying to make you an enemy, but I don't get it. It doesn't, I'd love to know what I dismissed. Can we put it that way? Right? When I hear the idea that a teacher dismissed something that they teach, meaning they know it, but they're not going to share it, that's not a good teacher. And that's not something that I try to do. If I know it, I share it. So it does sound like an accusation. I'm not saying you're my enemy. If I did something that's inappropriate and you're calling me out for it, you have a right to call me out. I want to address it. I don't let it go by. And if there's another comment that you made, John, I missed it. That's the point. Like I am kind of bouncing up and down on the list here, but I'm definitely trying to get everybody's. Okay. All right. So scrolling back up here. WorkPix 360, that's exactly how it should be done. My next door neighbor is Ken Duncan, an Australia icon in photography, and his team at the gallery do the same thing. They tell stories, they create meaning, they care. Absolutely, guys. I mean, that's what photography is in general, right? It's about making connections. Now, and again, maybe at least for me and my way of thinking, maybe that thought process comes easier. But I've told you guys before, for me, photography is not about the cameras. Right? You've heard me say that how many times? Photography is about the access. It's the access to people. So that whole idea of the stories and the connections and the relationships, like that's a very natural thing for me in that regard. That drives it. But I promise you guys, if you talk to any photographer who is making good money selling their pictures, they will tell you it's all about relationships, connections, emotions. It's putting those things together. That's what gets people to open up the wallets. That's what gets people to, slap those credit cards down. That's it. So, okay. Let's see here. Scrolling back up. Simon, any tips on converting leads into sales? I frequently get interested potential customers who then lose interest when they realize they have to travel a few hours or cover my travel expenses to them. So actually, Simon, there's a couple ways to look at that, right? Shall we say the short answer? Number one, I would have to ask kind of an obvious question. So I'm not trying to be funny or mean, but ask an obvious question. Is there the potential that your work, the quality of your work, does not meet the expectations of the prices and the costs? So that's one thing. And you don't have to answer that. That's a self-evaluation thing. I haven't seen your work. I'm not making a judgment, right? But here's another thing. Maybe more importantly, if on a regular basis you are getting requests from people to do work, and then when you actually talk to them, it turns out that they're like 4 hours away or something like that, I would actually look at it from the other direction and I would raise the question to you, are you missing something in your marketing? Meaning you are not making it clear to people where you are located. And I don't mean you have to have some statement that says, well, I'll come to you, but it's going to cost you an extra. No. I hate when people do that in their marketing, okay? But certainly, I live in Allentown, Pennsylvania. So if I had people that were contacting me constantly from like North Carolina to shoot a portrait, I would kind of have to look at the senses, is my marketing not clear and obvious where I am? Because at least most people, like for a portrait or whatever, if they're looking at a photographer's website and they're in North Carolina and the photographer's in New York, they're not, likely going to contact you, right? That's the whole point, okay? So I think that's kind of what you have to look at, John, or not John, I'm sorry, Simon. You need to figure out, are you communicating all the right information easily on your website? Step one. And by the way, not just website, social media, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. Those are the first things you got to look at. Okay? All right. So I think I've gotten pretty much everything here. I think so. Did I miss anything at the end? Tina's got one here. Tina, I bought a Godox for off camera and a smaller one for on camera. Now you're kind of frozen on how to use them. My first goal is freezing motion. Any recommendations on how to learn how to use? Tina, if you want Tina, I know you're part of my mentor group, so you know that I'm always going to give you the straight advice. My honest advice is just start taking pictures. Since I know you're just kind of getting started with this stuff, and I know you just got them, I would honestly encourage you, don't go on YouTube, don't read books, don't do any of that kind of stuff, right? Literally, go and create some problems for yourself. Try some things. Make some bad pictures. So you can look at the bad pictures and say, but I don't like this, but I don't like that. So that you can say it, not somebody else. And then that's when you start doing the research in terms of how do I get rid of this problem? Or how do I do better with this? That type of thing, right? So literally, there's one of the cool, for me, I know not everybody thinks this way, but one of the cool things about learning photography, it's a creative art form of sorts, right? So what that means is you actually have permission. It's okay to suck, to just try things, to do dumb stuff, right? And then, be like me, you've been at it for 40 some years, and here I am at the end of my career, and I make a living by doing dumb stuff in the studio. Because by doing that, I'm coming up with ideas that I've never thought of before. By doing that, I'm also realizing, ooh, I can teach people, okay? So I'm not saying that's where you should be, but the point is, it's about experimenting. And when you experiment, you've given yourself an experience, and then it's a lot easier to have an idea of what should I be researching? What should I be asking? So honestly, Tina, my sincere advice is go shoot, go experiment, and play. John, I saw your follow-up. I will look forward to your message, man. I have no ill will. Honestly, it sounded like I did something wrong. And I don't want to cut anybody off, okay? Look, tonight, you guys have been amazing. I know I'm over time, so I got to wrap up here, guys. You guys have been amazing. I appreciate all the support. And honestly, more than anything, I appreciate the level-headedness. I really do. I think we all have to try and do better. Like I admitted before, it's easy to get caught up in drama. I have to do better. We all do. And I appreciate all of you. Please know that. I appreciate all of you so much. And you will have my continued determination and commitment to be here for you, to help you, to see you improve. As always, gang, most importantly, please remember these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TOGCHAT. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.